Alright, so we're talking about approaches to ethical reasoning. Ethical reasoning is a reasoning process in which the individual examines the situation at hand in light of his or her moral convictions or ethical standards. So how can we look at this sort of thing? Well, you can look at duty-based ethics, religious ethical standards. Certainly from a Judeo-Christian point of view, we could look at the Ten Commandments. Okay, thou shalt not steal, which means if you take my Superman action figure, I'm going to kick your butt. Right. Would be an absolute ethical principle. If you steal, then you're unethical. Right? Thou shalt not lie. So lying would be unethical. What about Kantian ethics? It's another duty-based ethics, but it looks at the categorical imperative. Individuals should evaluate their actions in the light of the consequences that would follow if everyone in society acted in the same way. So not only should you determine what your perspective is, but also look at it if everyone in society were to behave the same way. If you cheat, then everyone will cheat, and education will be meaningless. So certainly, yes, if you cheat on one of my exams, and your neighbor cheats on my exam, have either you or your neighbor gotten anything out of the course? No. If you steal my Superman action figure, and someone else steals it from you, how do you feel? Again, if you look at it from a society standard, you can see how it makes sense. Principle of rights. Principle of rights or rights theory believe that a key factor in determining whether a business decision is ethical is how the decision affects the rights of others. Okay, so whenever you make a decision, how does that affect others? But then again, it begs the question, whose rights are most important? What about outcome-based ethics? Let's look at utilitarianism. It's personally one of my favorites. It focuses on the consequences of an action, not on the nature of the action itself or on any set of pre-established moral values or religious beliefs. So, is this done for the greater good? So, is killing okay? Well, if it's for the greater good, it might be. Is telling a little white lie okay? Well, if it creates something that is better, then it probably is. So you look at the ultimate consequence. Alright? Applying this theory requires a determination of which individuals will be affected by the action in question. Cost-benefit analysis, again from a business perspective, which involves an assessment of the negative and positive effects of alternate actions on those individuals and the choice among alternative actions that will produce maximum societal unity. Alright, so you have to look and see, what's going to be for the greater good. Corporate social responsibility is the idea that those who run corporations can and should act ethically and be accountable to society for their actions. Well, certainly. What is the outcome? If you act ethical, the theory is that you would make more money. Now, certainly, if you act unethically, you might make more money in the short run. However, in the long run, your profits will dwindle because of your unethical behavior and having to defend lawsuits from people like me. Stakeholder approach. A corporation could consider the impacts of its decisions on the firm's employees, customers, creditors, etc. Okay, so when you make decisions, how are the stockholders going to feel? Corporate citizenship. Corporations should behave as good citizens by promoting goals that society deems worthwhile and taking positive steps towards solving social problems. Again, when you have this particular point of view and you act in this certain manner, the idea is that you'll make more money in the long run. How should we make business decisions? Well, look at some of the guidelines. What is the law? Certainly, if you're going to break the law, it's probably not ethical. Rules and procedures. What are the rules and procedures associated with the corporation or the business? Values. What values do we have? Folks, I'm a big advocate of, the stuff you learn from mama growing up is probably ethical. Conscience. What's that little voice inside of you telling you? Promises. What promises have you made? And heroes. Would Superman be happy with the way you were behaving? Okay? So you can use that as potential guidelines to help you determine whether or not what you're doing is ethical. What about solutions? Right? You can always, inquire. Ask questions. Discussion. Make your own decisions. Can you justify what you've done? And once you've made the decision, evaluate what you've done so that in the future you make better decisions. On a global level, okay, you need to understand beliefs of people from other countries. Folks, believe it or not, people in Europe do not necessarily believe things the way we do. Right? Certainly people in China and Japan do not believe the way we do. Okay? So it's important to understand how other cultures behave. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This is really interesting. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. No. Folks, you are an American. You are supposed to act, like an American. As such, bribing officials, which is, legal overseas, you can't do it. Okay? Prohibition against bribery of foreign officials applies to U.S. companies and their agents. Okay? Accounting requirements. Bribes can be concealed in corporate financial records, but all companies must keep records that accurately and fairly reflect their financial record. Again, so folks, if you're doing business overseas, you have to abide by U.S. laws. Okay? Penalties for something like this, you can be fined up to $2 million. And as an individual, you could be fined up to $100,000 and look at up to 5 years in prison. So certainly it's not only is it good business practice to act ethically, it's also the law. And certainly, folks, don't go overseas and think that you can act unethically, because you can't.